ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। So as you know, we will be continuing our discussion on the mind which we had started last week. So before going into today's subject, today's aspect of the mind, we will just recapitulate a little of what we had discussed last time. So just share the so I think you can see the synopsis of what we had discussed last time. That the first thing is that the condition of the mind is all important in our life. That is what makes us or breaks us, makes us happy or miserable. Everything depends on the condition of the mind. Unfortunately, many of us, since we are not so aware of that all the time, we try to struggle more with the external conditions rather than try to improve the condition of our mind. That is why sometimes even after making all the efforts, we find that we are where we had started. So this thing is very important to know, that it is the mind which matters. Second is, we had discussed that the nature of the mind is, it is matter and thus distinct from the Atman or the soul. Only the soul or the Atman is conscious, our higher self. Everything else comes under matter. It may be gross matter, it may be subtle matter. So mind is also matter, but it is so subtle that that subtlety is of a different order altogether. So no instrument in the world can see the mind. We can know the mind only by its effects. For example, when we feel cold air, when we feel cold air or hot air on our skin, so we can't see the wind or the coldness of the wind. But when we feel cold on the skin, then we know that this is cold air. So this is knowing something by the effects which it causes. So here also, we know the mind only by its effects. We cannot see the mind directly. Then the next point we discussed is the mind is the antakarana or the internal instrument. It's the instrument through which we cognize and interact with the external world. The soul needs an instrument and that instrument is the mind. So we will discuss more about the antakarana today. Then, though unconscious, the mind reflects consciousness. The mind reflects the light of the self, just as the moon reflects the light of the sun. That is why the moon appears to be illumined by its own light, but actually it's borrowed light. Similarly, the mind also, it is so close to the self that it seems to be luminous, but actually this luminosity is borrowed from the only conscious entity which exists, that is the Atman or the higher self. And all that we do and think leaves an impression on the mind that we will discuss later in detail. And self-discipline is the only way to train the mind. If we let the mind loose, let it do whatever it likes, we cannot control it. It is just like a spoiled child in the house. If you let it loose for some years, let him or her do whatever he or she likes, then after a few years it becomes extremely difficult to control that child because that habit has been made. So once a habit has been created, it's extremely difficult to break it. So similarly, if we let the mind loose and let it do whatever it likes, then we will soon find that we have become a complete slave to the mind. We'll have to sit and stand at the mind's bidding. That is the thing. So this in brief is what we had discussed last time. Now we had also seen that Vedanta considers the cognitive aspect of the mind to be primary. Cognition is primary. All the functions of the mind, cognition is primary because other things like feeling and willing depend on the cognitive side of the mind. So we have seen that though mind is not conscious, it has the power of consciousness because it is associated with the spiritual self, the Atman. So through that light of consciousness, mind has some powers, and of these powers, the power of cognition is primary because all other powers depend on this. Unless there is some kind of cognition or consciousness, there cannot be any feeling or willing. Now, for this reason, Vedanta has particularly analyzed this cognitive aspect of the mind in great detail and takes into account its four states or functions. So, four states or functions which we will discuss today, but there are other things also regarding the mind, so I will just share with you. Today we will not be able to discuss everything. See, here you can see the human mind. First, it has four states or functions which we will try to discuss today. Then it has three levels. And then again it has three constituents and five conditions. So the human mind has four states or functions, three levels, three constituents and five conditions. So today we will try to discuss the four states or functions, and after this the other things, its levels, constituents and conditions. So this is the thing. So Vedanta has particularly analyzed this cognitive aspect of the mind and takes into account its four states or functions. What are the four states? We have discussed in a general way when we had discussed the Sankhya philosophy. So four states I will show you. That is the Manas, Buddhi, Chitta and Ahankar. So I just share the photo. So here you can see four states or functions of the mind. First comes Chitta or the mind stuff. That is what the mind is made up of, as it were. We will discuss all these. Then comes Manas. Manas means deliberation. When we are deliberating on something. Third comes Buddhi, because after deliberation we come to a decision. So that decision or the determinative faculty, decision making factor or the determinative faculty is called buddhi. And the fourth is ahankar or egoism. Egoism means when we associate ourselves with all these functions of the mind. When we say that I am thinking, I am deliberating, I have come to a decision. So when we say all those things, this is the function of the ahankar or egoism. So let us take up these one by one. So please remember these terms because we will use them again and again and again when we study Vedanta. So the four states or functions of the mind, very important. Mana, Buddhi, Ahankar and Chitta. So now just let us see how these things, how these four functions are reflected in our day-to-day activities. For example, we see something. We see something with our eyes. For example, we see a chair or a person, anybody. Now, Vedanta says that when we see a chair or anything, at first we are very vaguely aware of that. We don't recognize it as a chair right at that instant. First, we are aware that there is something. So this is a indecisive state. We don't know what it is. Then our mind questions, what is this? What is this? So this means that the mind is deliberating that the thing which I see, the thing which the eyes see in front, what is that thing? Here manas comes into play. Manas, okay, the mind. This manas is generally used in synonymously with the mind. But of course, here we are, since we are discussing the four factors of the mind, then to avoid confusion, we will term it as manas, that function of deliberation. Then after this deliberation starts, the mind searches within. So it searches in the chitta. The chitta is the mind stuff. The mind stuff is where everything is stored. It is like a big storehouse. Everything we do, hear, think, all the things, everything is stored in the chitta. So when the mind sees something and deliberates that what is this? Now, in order to find out what I am seeing in front of me, I need a reference. I have to search for a reference. Like in our catalog or something, suppose we have a email database or something. So some person tells us that, oh, you already have my email in your database. Then we go and search. Where is that email? So here also, when the mind sees something, it searches in its database. All the database is in the chitta. That contains everything. So in the chitta, suppose we are seeing a chair. So the mind dives deep into the chitta and it says, oh, I have seen this object before. It recollects. This is called a chair from its previous experience. So this recollection enables us to cognize that object. This is a chair. Now this function, when we know for certain that the chair is a chair, this function of determination is called the function of buddhi. When we come to a decision, we say that the buddhi is functioning. Okay, and the storehouse where all our data is kept, that is the chitta. Then after this decision has been made that this is a chair, then comes the feeling that I know this chair. This is the function of egoism. Egoism means this I. So when I know this chair thought arises, that is the functioning of the egoism or ahankar. So four processes are there. First, we see something vaguely, we don't know what it is. That is the function of the manas. It is deliberating. Second, it dives deep into the chitta for reference. Have I seen this object before? Searching, searching, searching. That search reveals that this is a chair. I have seen it many times before. There is no doubt. Then third thing comes that certain knowledge that yes, this is a chair. That is the function of the buddhi, which determines what anything is. And the fourth is, I know this chair. So that is the functioning of the egoism, that is the ahankar. So I have also made a diagram for that. I'll just share that with you so it will become very simple. So here you can see that first there is the external instrument, that is the eyes. The eyes see something. These external instruments take the sensation to our brain center. Brain center is where the real organ of vision is. We will discuss it just now. The real organ. This is not the organ. This is just an instrument. So this sensation goes to the organ. Then after that comes this. The mind, that is the manas, that is deliberation. Then the intellect or the buddhi, it knows for certain that this is the chair. Then egoism comes in the form of I know this chair. So all these are presented to the self, that is the Atman, and this gives rise to this one knowledge that I know this chair. So many things happen when we just see any substance in the world. But this happens so quickly that we think it is instantaneous. Oh, this is a chair. But when we say this is a chair, many things have happened inside already. So this has been beautifully described by Swamiji, this process, the whole thing, this process of cognition. So we will just read it from his works. So only this, you will see how easy Swamiji has made this, Swami Vivekananda. If you read the books on philosophy, etc., while preparing for these classes, I had read this Jadunath Sinha. He has written a wonderful book on Indian psychology. My God, if one or two pages you read of that, you will need some rest, mental rest. So their terms and so it becomes so difficult. But the same thing Swamiji has explained so beautifully. So I will just read a little. He in his Raj Yog, that is the Patanjali Yog Sutras, Swamiji has described. See, another term I will bring here to give you another headache. We have to know another term, that is vritti. Vritti means thought wave. So chitta is like a big lake. Okay. So what happens in a lake? When we throw a stone in the lake, that stone creates a ripple. So here also, in our chitta, the mind, when there is some sensation from outside. Suppose we are seeing a chair. So something has entered our mind through our instrument and through our organ. That is a sensation. So this is just like dropping a stone in our mind, which can be compared to a lake. So as soon as you throw a stone in a lake, what happens? A ripple is created, a disturbance is created. So that ripple in our mind, which we call thought waves, that is called a vritti. Please remember this vritti. So this also we have to understand if we have to understand the process of cognition. Now, if when we study Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, the very first sutra, the very first aphorism of that is definition of yoga. What is yoga? Before reading yoga, about yoga, we have to know what is yoga. So the very first aphorism is definition of yoga. What is yoga? Yoga chitta vritti nirodh. Chitta, now we understand what is the chitta, the mind stuff where everything takes place. So in the chitta there are vrittis, there are always thoughts, not only in the waking state, even when we are dreaming there are thoughts. We are thinking about something. Only when we go into deep sleep without dreams, there is no thought. But otherwise, we are thinking all the time. Now, what is yoga then? Yoga is when these modifications, these thought waves in the chitta, which are going on all the time, when they are stopped. So each attempt at stopping those vrittis, those thought waves, each attempt is called yoga. So when we are meditating, what we are trying to do? Instantly we cannot stop these vrittis. It is impossible. If anybody tries to do that, he will simply fall asleep and he will think that he has gone into samadhi. That is what happens generally. So that is absolutely impossible. So what happens? Yoga says you cannot stop these vrittis right at the beginning because you have absolutely no control over them. So first try to gain control over your mind. Gaining control is a long process. You have to lead a disciplined life, and at certain hours of the day should be given exclusively to this struggle with the mind, trying to control your thoughts. And the first step is try to think of one object in exclusion to all the rest. Okay, so suppose we study. That is also a form of concentration. When we study deeply something, then what do we try to do? We try to focus our mind. Then we don't want to think about this movie, this friend, that friend, anything. We just want to focus our mind on that subject. Otherwise, we will not be able to gain knowledge at all. So here also, we are trying to stop all other modifications, but keep only that modification in the mind which deals with the subject which we are studying. So whenever we try to concentrate on anything, actually unconsciously we are practicing yoga. But a spiritual aspirant should try to do this all the time. He should consciously try to get rid of all other modifications and keep only those which he desires. So his is a life of a full-time practice of yoga. That is the thing. So anyway, that is a different thing. So Swami Vivekananda, when he discusses this sutra, he discusses what are all these things? Because yoga chitta vritti nirodha. So we have to understand what is chitta. We have to understand what is vritti. And when we try to understand these, the other things will come up automatically. So Swami Vivekananda says, suppose we are seeing something. So I have eyes through which I am seeing something. The first thing to know is these eyes do not see. They are not the organ of vision. They are just an instrument. Okay. Eyes do not see. Our eyes. Take away the brain center, Swamiji says, take away the brain center which is in the head, the eyes may still be there. All this retina, etc., everything will be there. Pictures of objects will flash on the retina, but the eyes will not see. So eyes are only an instrument, not the organ of vision. The organ of vision is in a nerve center of the brain. So actually these external eyes are called gatekeepers. They let the sensation in. That is their only work. After the sensation has entered, it goes to the real organ which is in the brain. Then we see something. So this real organ which is in the brain, so this is the gatekeeper, suppose, compared to a gatekeeper, and this organ is the gateway to knowledge. One is the gatekeeper and one is the gateway to knowledge. So this organ of vision or hearing, of taste, anything, this organ is called Indriya in Sanskrit. So these are the terms which we have discussed. First, this sensation comes from the external world to the instrument. The instrument lets it go through. Then it goes to the Indriya. When it goes to the Indriya, then the process starts. We deliberate. That is the function of the manas. Then after deliberation, we search in the chitta. Mind stuff. Then we come to a decision. That is the function of the buddhi. After coming to a decision, we say, I know this particular thing. So only these two eyes will not be sufficient. Sometimes we find that a person is asleep, but his eyes are open. So light is there, light is coming through the instrument. The picture is there, but he doesn't see it. So in order to see something, the mind must be joined to the organ in the brain. That is the thing. So eye is the external instrument, but the real organ is in the brain, and the mind must be connected to the brain center to cognize anything. That is the thing. If our mind is not connected, suppose the sensation enters the instrument, it goes to the organ. But if our mind is not connected, we will not be able to see or hear. Suppose we have discussed this last time. Suppose someone tells us something, we are not paying attention, we don't understand what he said. We hardly hear because the mind is somewhere else. So first there is the instrument, then there is the organ, then third, the mind attached to these two. So mind, when some sensation enters, the mind takes the form of all these things. Manas, buddhi and ahankar. Please note that we don't have all these things separately. There is not separately a manas or a buddhi or ahankar lying. No. Just think of like it this way, that there is a big lake. This is a chitta where all these things are stored. And the lake has three different kinds of waves. Suppose one is a long wave, one is a curly wave, one is another shape. So these three waves are all happening in that lake, that is the chitta, in the mind. But since they are of different shapes, we give them different names. So all these things, this manas, buddhi and ahankar, all these are different ways in which the mind functions. But the mind is only one. When it functions in one way, we call it manas. When it comes to a decision, we call it buddhi. And when we say that I know this, we call it ahankar. Very simple example will make it clear. There is one person, in the morning he goes to play golf. Then he becomes a golfer. After that, he goes to his office, he's a businessman. Then we say he's a businessman. Then he comes home, he's a loving parent to his children. Then what do we say? He's a father to his parents. He's the same person. But when he was playing golf, that function, we say that he's a golfer. When he was doing business transactions, he was a businessman. When he was a loving parent to his children, he's a father. So he's the same person. So similarly, the mind, when it deliberates on something, we say that it is manas. When it comes to a decision, we say that it is buddhi. And when the feeling of I is created in that mind, we say that it is ahankar, but it is the same mind. So this is the process of cognition. That first the thing enters our external instrument, then the organ, etc., etc. We've discussed that. So all these things, this action, reaction, etc., when finally it is presented to the Purusha or the soul, then the Purusha knows that this is its X, Y, Z, etc., etc., etc. So this is the whole process. And the organs together with the manas and buddhi and egoism, this form a group called the ahankar. Antakaran. Antakaran. So I'll just show you a diagram. Because these terms will come again and again. So here you can see we have discussed each term, so you know everything now. Indriya, Indriya means the brain centers. Manas, Manas means when the mind deliberates. Buddhi, when the mind comes to a decision. And Ahankar, when the feeling of I arises in the mind. So these four, Indriya, Manas, Buddhi and Ahankar, this jointly is called the Antakarana or the internal organ. This is according to Sankhya philosophy. And Vedanta adds Chitta also to that. So according to Vedanta, the Antakarana consists of Indriya, Manas, Buddhi, Chitta and Ahankar. But according to Sankhya, Sankhya excludes Chitta. So it says only Indriya, Manas and Buddhi. So that famous hymn of Shankaracharya you all know. Mano, Buddhi, Ahankar, Chitta. Chittani Naham. So this Mana, Buddhi, Ahankar and Chitta plus the Indriyas, they form the Antakarana. So when we discuss it again and again, automatically you will remember that. So now these waves of thought in the Chitta, like we have already discussed the example of a lake. So all the ripples on the lake, they are similar to the waves, thought waves which arise every moment. And these thought waves are called vrittis. So what is thought? Swami Vivekananda beautifully describes it. Often if we are asked, what is thought? We have no answer, although we are thinking all the time. So what is thought? He answers it. thought is a force. Thought is a force just like gravitation and repulsion and all that. So, as if from the infinite storehouse of force in nature, the instrument which we have called the chitta takes hold of some force, absorbs it, and sends it out as thought. That is the thing. Where does this force come from? Force is supplied to us through the food we take. And out of that food, the body obtains the power of motion, etc. We are talking, walking, how? Because we are eating food, no. If we don't eat food, it will not be possible. So Vedanta says that food also has the gross part and the subtle part. So the gross part of the food goes towards building the gross objects like this body, hand, feet, etc. But the subtle part of the food goes towards the subtle force. That is thought. So now we know that how close is how closely our thoughts are related to what we eat. Because the subtle part of what we are eating, that becomes our thought. So if you eat too much exciting things, that day we will find it practically impossible to concentrate our mind. Because those things go and excite the brain. So the thought waves will not be under our control then. So this is the thing. And of course, we know that the mind is not intelligent, but it appears to be intelligent only because the soul is behind it, our real self. So, our real self is behind the mind, and the mind is just an instrument in the self's hand. It is the self's intelligence that is percolating through the mind. Mind you just imagine as some sort of, a filter. So we all use filters every day, hot water filter, this filter, that filter. So when the filter is clogged up, it's absolutely jammed, then water will not go through that. So we clean the filter so it can function effectively. Similarly, the mind is a filter through which the light of the self emanates. And the more impure our mind is, it is just like blocked up filter. So the light cannot emanate. The light is blocked. But the purer our mind is, more the light of self shines through. That power shines through. So when Swami Vivekananda stood in front of that Chicago Parliament of Religions and all that, so if you read the reminiscences, we can read some next week when we celebrate his birthday. So they thought that we in the Christian world, we had heard of emaciated saints, but we had never heard of powerful saints. So that power which was emanating from Swami Vivekananda, it was absolutely palpable. So what is the source of that power? The source of that power is the soul, which is behind all of us. But our problem is our mind is blocking that. So anyway, so this is the thing. So till the self is there, till the Atman is there behind the mind, it continues to function. But as soon as the Atman gives it up, it will fall to pieces. So this is these are the definitions of these terms. And another thing to note is this chitta or the mind stuff is there not only in human beings, it is there in all the animals. What is the difference? although the chitta is in every animal from the lowest to the highest, it is only in the human form that we find it as the intellect. The animals have intelligence, but they don't have intellect. Intellect is what? Which discriminates. This is right, this is wrong. So human beings don't act only by instinct. We have the power of discriminating. If two things are offered, we will see what is good or bad. But the animals are governed purely by instinct. They will not understand the good or bad of any action. That is why until the mind stuff or the chitta can take the form of intellect, it is not possible for the mind to liberate the soul. That is why immediate salvation, immediate liberation is impossible for any animal, because although they have a mind, their chitta cannot as yet take the form which we call the intellect. This is the thing. So the chitta or mind stuff is like a transparent lake, and the waves which rise in it by the impact of sense impressions, these waves are called the vritti, vrittis. So the mind consists of a succession of thought waves. From these mental waves arise desire. Then that desire transforms itself into will. I have a desire. I have a desire to eat a chocolate cake today, suppose. Then when I desire this, at one particular moment, I will say, yes, I have to go and purchase that cake because I am going to eat it. So that decision is called the will. That I am willing that yes, I will do this activity. So desire produces will. That desire transforms itself into will. Then I go. I get up and I go. So this is working through the gross instrument, the body. So desire first transforms into will and then starts working through our body. Now this work is endless, and each work produces its fruit, result. So the results of work are also endless. That is why our mind is always being tossed about by countless waves. One work, one desire, one fruit of work, then another desire, then another work, again the fruit of work. So all these modifications have to be got rid of. Why does Vedanta say get rid of desires? Why do we say that we have to practice renunciation? Because till the desires are there, they will give rise to waves. And those waves will react upon the body. And then we will try to satisfy the desire through the body. So as long as those desires are not controlled, these waves will go on and on and on. You cannot stop them. It is impossible. This is the thing. That is why self-control is necessary. Just don't go about satisfying all of your desires. Then there will be no stopping. This thought waves will never stop. And your mind will be never under your control. So that is what yoga is all about. And when the lake of the mind is completely still, when there is not even a single vritti there, then the Brahman, which is the absolute or God which is behind the mind, that completely reflects itself without any obstacle. That is called mukti or liberation or freedom or self-realization, whatever you call that. This is the thing. And there cannot be a single wave in our mind which is not conditioned by name and form. So, whenever we think something, always there is a form associated with that. You say a chair. Now, as soon as you utter this word a chair, the form of the chair will appear in the mind. You cannot stop it. So that is why when we study about meditation and all, that is why it is said that in the beginning the mind has to take the help of some form if we want to concentrate it, because each thought wave is conditioned by name and form. So of course all these will come later. So this is about our antakarana. Antakarana means indriya, manas, buddhi, chitta and ahankar. So just a small note now about this manas and buddhi. Let's see what Charak says. Now I want to introduce you people to Charak. Most probably you have not heard of this name. So I'll just share 1 second. I'll just share a photograph. Photograph means naturally there is no photograph. Charak was a very ancient rishi who lived thousands of years ago. So his treatise, what he wrote about this medicine and all these things, diseases, how to cure them, this treatise is called the Charak Samhita, and it is the oldest and most authentic treatise on Ayurveda and is the ancient medical science of that. Ayurveda, you know, is the ancient medical science of India. And this Charak Samhita, apart from giving information on medical conditions and the treatment, it also gives valuable information on the geographical and social and economic conditions of India. So this Charak Samhita is still very much valid because the human body has not, the fundamental constituents of the human body have not changed much. So this Charak Samhita is a huge thing. It has 8 books and 120 chapters. So just I will show you in one of the parks of India, there is a huge statue of this Rishi Charak. So I'll just show you. So here you can see this is supposed to be Maharishi Charak. Of course, no one knows who he looked like, how he looked like. So here you can see this. You can read this Maharishi Charak, 200 BC. Following the ancient tradition of travel by sages, Maharishi Charak traveled extensively. Based on personal experiences, he wrote Charak Samhita, the greatest treatise on medical treatment of the human body, and gave the world the unique gift of freedom from diseases. So this is supposed to be a statue of this ancient rishi. So just let us see what Charak says about this Manas and Buddhi. I will share the exact text with you. You can read it. Yeah. So just I'm showing you because thousands of years ago, these facts had been known and recognized by these great sages. That is just what I want to show. So see here you can read yourself. This is from that book about Indian psychology which I was telling you about. So here you can read, Charak holds that there are 11 sense organs 5 sensory organs, 5 motor organs, and 1 internal organ or manas. So this we have already discussed, that 5 sensory organs and motor organs. So hands, feet, etc. These are called the karmendriyas. And the senses, this touch, smelling, hearing, all these are called the Gyanendriyas, that is the organs of knowledge. So sometimes he mentions 12 sense organs. So Manas and Buddhi also he takes as organs, but that hardly matters. So according to Charak, the mind is atomic and one in each body. It is different from the external senses. This mind is sometimes called sattva. Its functions are regulated by the contact of its objects with the soul. When the objects enter the mind, then from the mind they are presented to the soul. And this mind, it controls the functions of the external senses. That we all know. So they can apprehend their respective objects when they are led by the mind. So our eyes can see, our ears can hear, our nose can smell. Why? Because the mind controls them. So when they are led by the mind, they can perform their functions. The functions of the mind are the apprehension of objects through the external senses, subjecting them to control, comparison and ratiocination. Then Buddhi ascertains the nature of the objects, which we have discussed. Certain knowledge is the function of Buddhi. This also we have discussed. So when Buddhi has brought about definite apprehension, one begins to act, guided by the Buddhi. Then we act. So when Buddhi tells us this is a chair, then only we go and sit on that. When it is definitely ascertained, yet this is a chair, I won't fall down if I sit. So then we go and sit. It tells us this is a cake, you can eat it. Then we go ahead and eat it. So all these are done by our intelligence, that is called the Buddhi. So that is why it is said that the most important among these functions is the Buddhi, because only when we come to a decision, we start acting upon that decision. So Buddhi is the immediate instrument among all the external and internal senses and makes over the object to the self, even as among a host of servants, one person becomes the prime minister while the other are its subordinates. That is the thing. So a king has many ministers, but there is one primary, that is called the prime minister. So king does not interact, suppose he has a huge army, he will not interact individually with all his soldiers. He will interact with his general. He will give his commands through his general. So similarly, the mind is like a king. And its prime minister, the most important, who is closest to him, is called the Buddhi. That is why when we say to someone in a joke that if he has no intelligence, what will we say? We won't say that, oh, don't you have any manas? We in Indian languages we say, oh, तुम्हारी बुद्धि नहीं है क्या? Don't you have any buddhi? In Bengali we will say, oh, तुम्हारी बुद्धि शुद्धि नहीं. In English we will say, oh, don't you have any intelligence? We don't say, don't you have a mind? We say, don't you have any intelligence? So this intelligence is reflected in the buddhi. That is the thing. So buddhi is the most important of these functions of the mind, we can say. If we come to a wrong decision, then our life will be in problem. That is the thing. if the buddhi is not working properly. See, this may be the external instrument may be working fine. We will see something. We will see a chair or something. This organ is fine. It recognizes it as a chair. The mind, the manas is fine. It starts deliberating. But if the decision is wrong, the final decision is wrong, everything comes to naught. Like what happened in, we know that incident in Mahabharata. Mahabharata, the Pandavas had built a huge mansion. And the Kauravas, these cousins were invited. So that mansion was built in such a way that some portions, the solid ground seemed like it was water. And the water seemed like solid ground. So Duryodhana, the most evil of those brothers, he came. So in those days, the people used to wear long clothes and all like that. In India, we call that dhoti and all that. So there was solid ground, but he thought it was water. So he just lifted up his cloth a little so it would not be wet. But when he stepped on it, he found it was solid ground. Then when he thought it was solid ground, he nearly drowned in it because it was water. So why? Now all these things were working. This external organ, his sense organ, his manas, everything. But the decision made by the buddhi was wrong. Because it was built in such a way. So because of that wrong decision, that was his fate. Then you know that the Draupadi saw that and made a comment that the sons of a blind person are also blind. And that some say that one comment led to the war of Mahabharata war. Anyway, that is a different thing. So this is the thing. I think we have analyzed the four functions or the states of the mind in various ways. Various philosophers have described it in various ways, and we have tried to study all these so that we can have a clear idea. So all these things happen in the chitta, like all the waves arise in a lake. This is the main thing. And all the different kinds of waves which arise may be given different names, but they are all a part and parcel of the lake. So all these different states, they are given different names because they have different functions, but they are all activities of the same mind. Same mind. That mind stuff, chitta, all these things are taking place there. This is the thing. So we have seen that the mind has also 3 levels, then 3 constituents and 5 different states, so that we can try to discuss next time when we discuss this subject. So let us stop here today. I think you have had enough for one day. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu.